In lesson 2, we looked at 3 of the different data types that we have in Java. In lesson 3, we're going to look at strings and some more things that we can do with strings to make them more useful for us. So the first thing we're going to do, again, is make a new class, call it lesson 3, and this is where we're going to do our practicing in for this, and we're going to create a main. So we're ready to do that. So the first thing that we always want to do is to learn how to combine together multiple strings. That's called concatenation when you join together multiple strings. And so let's create a couple strings here to join together. So our first string we're going to call mm, and that equals hello. Our second string is going to be nx, which equals good buddy. And then we're going to join them together. And the way you concatenate in Java is with the plus sign. So we're basically going to think about that like we are adding together. So we're going to make a string C and we're adding together our two strings. And then if we print out C, we will print what happens if you join those two strings together. So system.out.println C, and if we run it, see at the bottom it prints hello good buddy. Now notice it didn't add a space between those because we didn't tell it to. If we want to add a space, there's a couple different things that we could do. One thing that we could do, and this is probably the most common in Java, is after our first plus sign, we're going to create a new string, which is just a space. So a quote mark, a space, a quote mark, and then another plus sign. So now we're actually going to be joining 3 strings together. The string that's stored in hello, the string that's just a space, and the string nx that holds good buddy. So now if we run it, we can see it says hello good buddy and it adds in the space. Another way to do this that's a little less common is to add a space inside one of our strings here. So instead of putting that right there, we could add a space at the end of hello, but before the quote mark. And that would print hello good buddy with a space. Or we could put a space before the G inside the quote for good buddy. And that would also print it out. So those are strings, and that's what concatenation is. It's joining together multiple strings. Right? One of the methods that's going to be really useful, and method is another computer science term for a way of using a particular class or particular group of programs. And so is the length method. As you might guess, the length method will tell how long something is. So if I had a string like Donald Duck that I called the name, and I have an integer called len that is the name dot length, then I could use that. I could print it out. And if I run that, it prints out an 11 because that's how long Donald Duck is. So a couple things to notice. If you count the number of letters here, there's 10 letters, but it also counts the space. So that's where it gets the number 11. And then the way that methods are used, I want to run the length method on the string the name. So I do the name dot length, and it knows to look at what length means for strings. It means how many characters are there in the string. And every method that we run will have parentheses after it and open and close parentheses. Sometimes there will be something inside there, sometimes there won't, but every method will include those parentheses. So a couple other things that we're going to do. One is once we know how long something is, we could choose to use a portion of that string for different things. So suppose I wanted to break a string into pieces. I can use another method called substring that could print out a portion of that. So here's my next string that we're going to use. We're going to create a string called my pet, and it's going to equal Sparky the dog. And then if I do another string that is small part, and that equals my pet dot substring, and we put a number inside the parentheses, we could print that out. So if I run this, it's going to print just a portion of, it's going to take a portion of Sparky the dog, it's going to store it in small part, and then it's going to print it out. So let's see what it prints. It printed KY the dog. So what it did was it started with character number 4 and printed that out. So it might be a little bit surprising. The K that it printed looks like the 5th letter, but the way that computer science programs count strings, they start with 0. So S is the 0th letter, P is the 1th letter, A is 2, R is 3, K is 4. So when I say substring 4, it starts with character number 4, which is actually the 5th character because it starts counting at 0, and it prints the rest of that out. So that's how you could print starting at the 4th letter and continuing all the way to the end of a string. Another way that you can do it is inside the parentheses here, instead of just doing a 4, we could put a 4, a comma, and then another number. So let's find out what 4 comma 12 does. 4 comma 12 prints out KY the D. And so if we count up our letters, or if we look over here, they've actually broken it into a table. The D is the letter in spot number 11, or index number 11. It doesn't print out letter number 12. So the way substring works with two numbers, it starts with character number 4, and it goes all the way up, but not including character number 12. That word index, that's the word that we use when we're counting those. And we're going to use index for a lot of different things this year. But the index of a character is the location in a string that it's sitting in. There's a number of other string methods that we can use to make changes to different strings. One of the nice things about the way that Java names its methods is a lot of them use clues to tell you what the methods are going to do. So a method called toLowercase is going to change something to all lowercase. A method called toUppercase is going to change something to all uppercase. So let's see how that works with our string my pet over here. If I do system.out.println my pet dot to lowercase, and I add in the set of parentheses and close the parentheses and a semicolon, and I print that out. It prints Sparky the dog all in lowercase. If I tried to uppercase instead and I print it out, I'll get Sparky the dog in all uppercase. Now, one thing we do have to make sure we do is actually use that thing. So it would be acceptable to Java to simply put in my pet.to uppercase, but that doesn't do anything at all if I tried to print out my pet. and I run that, it doesn't actually change it. It figures out what it equals, but then it just forgets about it. So we have to make sure that we either print it or we store it as something else. I could store it as string my pet uppercase equals my pet dot to uppercase. And then if I tried printing it out, uh, it stored it and I can actually use it. What about concatenating strings and numbers? Will it work to do that? If I wanted to take my pet and add the number 4, will that work out okay? I can give it a try and find out. So my pet uppercase, and then I just do +4. Works out great, adds the number 4 at the end. So in some programming languages, you have to do something special to be allowed to concatenate numbers with strings. In Java, it'll just do it for you. One thing you do want to be careful about, if you wanted to do math, you have to be careful that you do the math before you do the concatenating. So what would happen if I try to print 4 plus 4? It'll do the math, add them together, make the number 8. But what if I try printing my pet +4 plus 4? Will it print my pet plus 8? No, it'll print my pet, and then it'll print the 2 4s. So if I wanted to do the math first, I have to put it in parentheses. It knows the order of operations that you do things in parentheses first. So 4 plus 4, and then my pet concatenated with that solution. Some other things we might want to print. What if I wanted to print something that had a special character like a quotation mark in it? I've been using quotation marks to say what's inside a string or what should be stored in a string. So what if I wanted to talk about something like my dog's nose? So if I want to make a string called nose, and I want it to equal my dog's nose, that works fine because it's a single quote. But what if I want to do something with double quotes inside it? Well, as soon as I put in the double quotes, it ends that string and it wants to know why I put these other characters in here. So there's something called an escape sequence. An escape sequence is the backslash. It's the slash that's above the return key, not the one we normally do. But if you do a backslash in front of something, then it knows that the next thing is an actual character that you want to use rather than what that character normally means to Java. A couple other escape sequences that we'll use sometimes. If I want to put something one string but have it print on 2 lines, I can put \n. And if I print this out, it'll print my dog on the first line, and then the \n says go down to a new line, and then it printed space nose after that. And then another one that we're going to talk about, what if I actually wanted to print a backslash on the screen? A backslash is the escape character, so if I try just doing my dog \nose, it doesn't know what to do with this. So I need to put a backslash to say the next character is not what it's normally used for, and then another backslash to say actual backslash. How many backslashes will be printed if I print this out? Just one. So if I want to print 2 of them, I would actually have to type 4 of these. So in PCs, a lot of times file names for things start with a capital letter to say what drive it's on, and then some backslashes to say that this is a storage location. So I might say string file name equals quote C colon backslash my file, and it won't be able to use that because there's a single backslash. So if I put two backslashes, now it'll know that my file name is a backslash. In HTML files, you'll notice the forward slashes, those work just fine, but the backslashes need an escape character so that they can be used correctly. So after this, you'll notice that there's a number of questions in the lesson, followed by a project this time. In this project, you're going to need to use two of the methods that we've been talking about. One is the string length method, and one is the string substring method. And you're going to use those to chop off the first couple letters of some strings and the last couple letters of some strings. So we talked about how to use substring to cut off things by putting two numbers inside the parentheses, but you're also going to have to use length to figure out how long the strings are. The strings are going to be different lengths, and I don't want you to count them. I want you to tell the computer to count them, and then use that length, take a couple letters off the end, and write the program called name that celebrity.